Alright, this is just kind of a test for live streaming. I haven't really done this before, so I thought I'd just pop on and see how this app works. Although it looks like my network is giving me issues in terms of bandwidth, so I'm not sure why that is. I usually have a very good connection, but the picture does not look great, and it's not really great if I'm trying to show maps for the discussion. So what I wanted to do was just look and see if, just compare some different Gettysburg maps. I was sitting here looking at the map for 3 days of Gettysburg, which is the GMT, like the third edition of the GMT title. And the most recent version, and realizing that this may be my favorite Gettysburg map, even more so than Rick Barbour's Summer Storm map, just because while I like Rick Barbour's artwork style, which has that very hand-drawn style, this has sort of the counterpoint to that, which is a very clean graphic style. And typically GMT's maps employ that very clean style. This map is, I don't know if this was Simonich who did this map. I'll look on the back of the box. Counter layout, yeah, map art was Mark Simonich and Joe Youst. So I don't know if it looks like Simonich to me. I don't know if that's also, if it really was collaborative, or Joe Youst maybe just did the research or something for the locations of things or scale or stuff like that, and if Simonich actually did the art. But it looks very much like a Simonich map to me, which has his maps always have very clean lines, they're very detailed and very clean, and this kind of epitomizes that. But the other thing that I like about it is that there's a certain amount of, I guess, there's a certain period look to this. If you look like here, just with the font used for Gettysburg, just gives it kind of a, I don't know, more of a, not even an antique look, but just something that looks very much different than, say, the Gamers, which has the other big monster Gettysburg title, which is Last Chance for Victory. And while the Gamers maps are always incredibly accurate, and certainly in the Line of Battle series have a ton of elevation changes. I want to say it's something like 13 to 15 elevation changes. It looks like a Gamer's map. They always use that same font. They use the same graphics. And so you end up with their maps all have the samey feel, and certainly none of them at all, from their World War II titles to their Civil War titles to everything in between, none of them have any period feel to them, because they all look the same. They all have the same, I don't even know what the font is that they use for all the lettering on their maps, but it's the same. It's something right out of Microsoft Word. So color-wise and everything, they look great usually. But in terms of style, in terms of evoking a period style, they fail pretty miserably. The GMT maps in that regard are better. Certainly the best is Clash of Arms and Rick Barbour's Summer Storm maps. So this one, however, just in terms of color, in terms of graphics, in terms of artwork, I think is probably my favorite. You're just looking here at the round tops. You get a sense of the terrain there. I don't know that it was quite that rocky all the way along Plum Run, having been along this terrain personally. Yeah, sure, there's a lot of rocks, although this makes it look like it's literally just a rocky minefield. The bigger rocks were over in the Devil's Den area, which do show up as bigger rocks. So that's a decent representation of the Devil's Den. Usually on most of the Gettysburg maps, you don't see any rocks really represented at all on the map. So that's interesting to me. And then of course you've got over here the peach orchard, and it happens to be right where the three maps join. And these maps, they're not quite perfectly put together. Usually I use removable tape when I'm putting together multiple maps. But here I didn't, just because I probably won't have this set up all that long, because I'm planning on probably playing Terrible Swift Sword before I play Three Dog. So they don't quite fit together, but they do lay together better because there's a significant overlap. There's actually a border on this map here because these two lay over it, and so they put a border there, which is nice because it gives you plenty of overlay. I don't like it when maps have, maybe a half a hex of overlay. That's not enough. If you've got multiple tables underneath that might shift when people are leaning on them or something, even with removable tape, you're going to get slippage, and the maps aren't going to fit together perfectly. So these happen to do a better job than most that I've seen, where I was able to lay them together without tape, put the plexi over them, and not get a whole lot of shift. So that's pretty good. Usually the worst in terms of overlay turns out to be Clash of Arms. Certainly, I want to say La Bataille de la Moscova in the La Bataille system. Those four maps really just fit together extremely poorly. So the other thing on Gettysburg maps that everybody always handles differently is the railroad cut, which I believe that's what we're looking at right here. So apparently, like, trying to represent this accurately, even at a regimental level, in terms of the size of the hex and the effect that it has on play, everybody handles it differently. Some handle it poorly. You've got, I think, the Clash of Giants Civil War game, which is handled at like maybe the brigade or divisional level. I think brigade level, but at the scale of the hexes, they have a whole hex that's the railroad cut. Well, the railroad cut would be, I forget what the actual size of it is, but in terms of a hex that's maybe several hundred yards across, and I don't even know actually what the scale is here. I'm not sure if it says somewhere on the map or near the key somewhere. I don't know. I'm sure somebody out there probably knows what all the scales of these different games are. But some larger scale game where you're moving at the brigade level, really the railroad cut would not actually take up a whole hex. The problem that designers have is that the railroad cut had such a huge impact on the initial fighting at Gettysburg. You had a bunch of Confederates surrendering in it. You had a bunch of Union troops surrendering in it. People would just keep getting caught in it, thinking it was cover, and it ended up not being useful cover at all for any of them. And so, ended up getting these mass surrenders or people getting gunned down and casualties and stuff. So it had all this impact on kind of the swinginess of the opening fighting on the battlefield. So let's take a look at, zoom out here, at the Gamers Last Chance for Victory maps. I probably won't put them all out because there's 4 of those, but just looking at how they handle some of the more prominent features within the game. And here, the layout's definitely different because of the 4 maps, there's more surrounding terrain that allows for more maneuver. You can see color-wise, these are fairly similar. I forget which one overlaps over which. It's been a couple of years since I played this. I guess I will lay all 4 maps out, since this is not proving as cumbersome as I thought it would be. And if I remember right, this map also had some map errata, although not in terms of gameplay, but in terms of geography. And I actually printed out, somewhere down here, I actually printed out a sticker to put on the map. Thought it was near Rose's Woods. Yeah, so there's like an overlay here where I believe the original map, if I can figure out, I just filled the overlay. So right in here, I think the original map had forest in this gap here, and there was not actually, it wasn't actually forested between the Rose Woods and the Stony Hill here. So I guess I printed that out well enough and placed it well enough that you almost can't tell. There's a little double line here where you can tell the sticker was laid out. But that was the only actual map errata. But I always like it when they do provide a high quality file that's to the right scale, so you can just print it out, cut it out, and stick it on your map, and no one's the wiser. You do need a pretty good printer for it, though. So looking here, so you see, I was talking about like all the rocks, in between the running along the Valley of Death. You don't actually see rocks on this map. You only see them, let's see, at the Devil's Den hex right here. The only place they actually illustrate rocks on the map. Just reading this text here. What is that? AKA Big Rocks or Raccoon Den, maybe? Maybe that's what it used to be called before it was Devil's Den. I always thought it was Devil's Den even before the battle. You do see some rocks back here on Little Round Top as well. But here you can see these slope lines and then just a crazy level of elevation and very subtle changes, so it's pretty difficult to determine all the elevation changes on this gamer's map. But you can see here what I'm talking about with the font. This is the font that the gamers uses on all their maps. World War II, Civil War, you name it, it's all the same. But this looks more like more of a technical style of map in terms of the graphics. It doesn't have quite the quaint look that the GMT map has. Here, they address the railroad cut by placing some impassable hex sides there. So, units can't march across that hex side because of the steep nature of that railroad cut. Just be climbing down too steep of a slope. So overall, it's a handsome map, but I think I still just like the gamey sort of graphics of the GMT version. And of course, you also have the infamous, and I just got a copy of this recently, that I did an unboxing of. And this is kind of the original version of 3 Days of Gettysburg. This is Terrible Swift Sword, but it is the TSR version, which is notorious. Let me move the camera here. this roughly where everything is supposed to be. It's way off. I don't know, this one's proving harder to match up. I think that's... There we go. I think I overlapped too far. Well, close enough approximation. This one clearly not as easy to match up. So you look at this and say, why is it pink? And that's a good question, and one that I can't answer. Just one of those things that's in the annals of terrible design decisions. Yeah, wow is right. So this was the precursor to the 3 Days of Gettysburg. Still the Richard Berg design. He's still the credited designer for 3 Days of Gettysburg, although, you know, again, that's the third version of a largely completely different system than what the original Terrible Swift Sword was. And here, you know, the original Terrible Swift Sword had a Redmond-Simonson map, and he did fantastic maps for SPI back in the day. But, you know, I don't know if they used his original, you know, map graphics for this or not. I haven't actually seen the Terrible Swift Sword original maps, so I'm not sure how close the graphics are on this, you know, in terms of your town graphics, your orchard graphics, streams, swamp, and so forth. But the colors certainly are nothing that Redmond-Simonson would have used. He did use lots of this kind of blank tan space for open terrain. Here, you know, you want to get the elevation changes and so forth. But why you would go with anything at a, you know, at a scaled higher elevation from either forested hexes. Yeah, high contrast against green. That's certainly a good point. So maybe good works for visually determining terrain, but I'm not sure that that's again, it doesn't work in terms of colors on a map, so, or at least not what you expect to see on a map, certainly for this period, and certainly at the tactical level. You know, I've seen pink used. A good example of pink being used on a map to what I thought was decent effect was in the World War I game, recent release from Compass called Balance of Powers, where they used, I think Austria was pink, and so each country at a strategic level map was sort of color-coded, and the colors looked similar to like a map you would see in National Geographic or something, you know, in the early 20th century, where you would have kind of these multiple shades of primary colors and secondary colors, and so that worked there at the strategic level. At the tactical level, where you're dealing with actual individual terrain features, you're dealing with ridges, you're dealing with roads, you're dealing with forests, you know, slopes and things like that. It's going to be, you want earth colors because you're looking at something representing, you know, earth physical terrain features. So that's my feeling on it, is why you wouldn't go with brown here. So, yeah, and maybe what the commenter just said there earlier about your color theory of, well, you want to use high contrast colors so that people can quickly and easily tell apart these elevation changes. You know, that color theory bleeding over into the design, where it's a sound color theory, but it's not very sound appealing graphic design. So that's just the sense that I get here. But interestingly, this one will probably be the one that I play next before I get to 3 Days of Gettysburg, because I want to see the earlier iteration of the Terrible Swift Sword system. This is the second version of Terrible Swift Sword. And my other focus here is how they do the railroad cut. Same thing here. They just give it steep slopes. I don't know if within the game if these are actually impassable or not. They are the only hexes on the map that appear to actually look like this, that has this kind of slope graphic on it. Even like on the round tops or at Devil's Den, I don't see any similar graphic to this, so it may be impassable. I haven't actually read the rules to Terrible Swift Sword yet. So unfortunately, compared to the 3 Days of Gettysburg, which I think is the most period-appropriate looking map just in terms of graphic design, this one certainly the least period-appropriate map. This looks very much like a map of its era, which was the mid-'80s. This was 1986 when this came out. Just the overall graphics to me are very evocative of what TSR was putting out at the time. Although they did keep the SPI style gray borders, but yet didn't keep any of the color scheme. And yeah, it doesn't look like terrain really at all. I mean, when you get up close to it, yeah, you can see, okay, yeah, there's forest here, but why this particular green in here? It's kind of backwards in a sense too. If you look at the gamer's map here underneath, which uses the darker shades of green. Look over here along the creek. Your darker shades of green are your lower elevation, and stuff gets lighter as it goes up. Whereas here, you kind of have this weird alternate backwards version of that, where as things get higher, it gets darker. So you've got, yes, you have some low-lying sort of swampy areas here, but this here, which is the Valley of Death, there's actually Plum Run runs along here, which you can see on the other maps. They don't actually illustrate it here, but it's a little creek. This would be your lowest hexes here, and yet they're lighter colored than the presumably higher hexes, and then you're up onto a slope here. And then you've got woods. Apparently these woods are different than these woods. It's I don't know, it's just it's a baffling sort of design. So it'll be interesting to play, to try and play on here and see how the terrain on this particular map affects the actual play of Gettysburg, knowing how that battle turned out, knowing historically precisely how the terrain affected the actual battle. It's going to be a very interesting playthrough. So I would lay out the Rick Barbour maps just to give a comparison there. Although again, I don't know how great my feed is. This looks very pixelated on my phone, which is disappointing because I typically have pretty crystal clear reception. So I would have laid out the Rick Barbour maps, but I put them away and they're on the shelf. So that might be something I'll revisit later. But anyway, I just wanted to kind of talk through and walk through the layout of these different monster level Gettysburg maps. There's been a lot of other smaller maps done of Gettysburg. I mean, the game's been covered at every conceivable level, from the operational level all the way down to the not even the small unit tactical level. You think of like Avalon Hill's Devil's Den, which was just the Devil's Den and Little Round Top battle, which I don't know if that was at company level. I don't think it was that low, but if you're talking about the Rick Barbour Summer Storm maps, I don't know if you can order those directly from him. Summer Storm, the game, it's not very hard to find, and it's fairly cheap. I mean, you can probably find Summer Storm for $40 or so, you know, if you look around hard enough. And the nice thing about his Summer Storm maps is you can play them with the Gamers Civil War Brigade series Thunder at the Crossroads, which is brigade level Gettysburg. The old Civil War Brigade series Gamers maps are pretty ugly because they have a hex-based elevation change as opposed to what Dean Essig ended up doing with here, where your terrain, your slopes, and elevation changes are independent of the hex grid. So you know you get multiple elevation changes within a hex. The old Gamers maps for the Civil War Brigade series were elevation change per hex, so the elevation changes were bound to the hex grid. It just makes for uglier maps. But you can use Rick Barbour's Summer Storm maps with Thunder at the Crossroads. The games are at the same scale, which is pretty cool. So if you find Rick Barbour's game, his system that he designed for Summer Storm, to be impenetrable, it is, like I do, it was nice to be able to just say, well, I'm just going to play a system that I know, the Civil War Brigade series, on these awesome maps for Summer Storm. So that is the one nice thing. If you find Summer Storm but don't actually like the game Summer Storm, hey, you can use it for Thunder at the Crossroads, which is a very good treatment of Gettysburg. So anyway, thanks for those of you who joined and commented at my first attempt at a live stream. I didn't want to do anything where I was, you know, actually playing a game or anything like that, just because I'd be too conscious of making mistakes. So I thought, well, for my first sort of test run at this live stream thing, I would just talk about something I love to talk about, which is wargame maps, wargame artwork on maps, and particularly for the Civil War, since I've been on a big Gettysburg kick. So I'll be going there in August, so I'm sort of prepping myself at playing through a number of Gettysburg games. So anyway, thanks everybody for watching, and I'll probably be live streaming again in the future, maybe with some actual playing of some of the games I have on the table right now. So talk to y'all later.